Hi, my name is Fred Nelson. I'm the founder and executive director of the Inside Out Network. It's a nonprofit that was birthed in Chicago. It's now based in Tucson, and we're helping to reshape reentry for people leaving incarceration with a groundbreaking, invisibility-busting online platform that allows returning citizens and service providers to see and be seen and to communicate directly with each other, beginning pre-release and continuing post-release. You can think of it as sort of an eHarmony for reentry. And we've forged partnerships with departments of corrections, and we successfully launched the ION platform in Arizona, Illinois, and Oregon, and we're working on some other states. We also wrote and distribute a book called The Spiritual Survival Guide for Prison and Beyond. It's now in its second edition, and it's available in paperback in a free online version that we can get to you, and on the Edovo platform for those who are incarcerated. Now we've been working in reentry for about 20 years, and over those years, our research and our experience has revealed what we are calling a great disconnect. So first, our data from nearly 14,000 men and women leaving incarceration that shows that nearly 40% of them are seeking a church or ministry upon their release. That means there's massive ministry potential all around us. Second, although some large congregations are doing wonderful reentry ministry, the reality is that most ordinary congregations are not currently engaged in reentry ministry in any intentional or meaningful way. Most feel stymied by the question of how to do effective reentry ministry and tend to rule themselves out, saying, we're just not capable of that. There's the great disconnect. In the light of this disconnect between all the opportunity that is there, and the lack of churches committing to this in an effective way, we undertook a broad survey of what's happening and what isn't happening in congregation-based reentry ministry across the United States. And in the process, we talked to 66 different congregations. We discovered some things, some reproducible models of reentry ministry, and have forged 8 different distinct pathways that ordinary congregations can explore for themselves. We've also, along the way, developed a new paradigm, a new framework for thinking about justice, those returning from incarceration, and the ways to engage with them. And that's what we want to share with you in this video. So let's start with the numbers. There are roughly 1 congregation for every 2 people being released. Roughly 350,000 congregations, and 600 to 650,000 people leaving prison yearly. Our focus is on the smaller congregations that fall into what they call the family-sized or pastoral-sized or small program-sized categories. And studies show that the average congregation in North America has roughly 70 regular participants on a weekly basis. And these smaller-sized congregations, they make up the vast majority of congregations in North America, and they can be found in virtually every neighborhood where people are being released. So why the great disconnect? Well, various reasons. From the one side, many returning citizens struggle with unhealthy shame. Many of them have experienced spiritual growth during incarceration, but they also carry a persistent shame-filled feeling that they are fundamentally flawed and unacceptable, and that consequently they don't belong, they aren't wanted, and they won't fit in with, ordinary church people. They're a little hesitant. On the other side, not every church is motivated. Some churches are focused on other opportunities. Not every church is equipped, right? The fact that the median church in the U.S. has only 70 regular weekly participants means that many congregations simply just don't have the bandwidth to undertake ministries outside their existing core strengths. The fact that not every church is in the right place, right? The geographical distribution of churches at large and the neighborhoods where the majority of returning citizens are being released don't neatly match up. Many congregations focus on equipping their members to serve outside the congregation rather than through the congregation. The vast majority of congregations can't adopt a kind of a professional social service approach to reentry. And for good or ill, the current dominant framework for thinking about reentry is a professional one. This means that most congregations look at it and they rule themselves out and say, we're small, we're not capable. We're going to be challenging this paradigm a little bit later. Often, though, when congregations do get into the game and adopt a social service model, they inadvertently end up creating, clients instead of brothers or sisters in the faith. And returning citizens can often feel like projects or perpetual second-class citizens among congregational members, and can feel alienated from the very places they dreamed about while they were incarcerated. There's the fact that many pastors and other congregational leaders can display a kind of a generalized reluctance to do this, born of the perception that reentry ministry is not only a kind of a niche ministry over there, right, that's kind of peripheral to their primary work, but also that it's complicated, that it's time-consuming, that it's potentially divisive in the congregation, and it's something they didn't train for and they haven't personally experienced. Two more reasons, maybe. One is many congregations just cherish their identity as a spiritual home, right? And you tend to safeguard their boundaries of their home to ensure the safety and comfort of their family members. So welcoming a returning citizen, a single returning citizen, that might feel manageable, but the prospect of having 10 returning citizens at the front door, this kind of raises a reflexive fear that this place is no longer going to feel like home, right? Or maybe allowing program participants to meet in a church basement on a Monday night, that's one thing. But the prospect of inviting them, intentionally inviting them to worship in the pews, to use the restrooms, and to mingle in the fellowship hall on a Sunday, that can sometimes feel more intrusive than attractive. And then finally, the simple reason for that many congregations just operate in the dark. A lack of exposure to and the mystery surrounding the correctional environment leaves churches with many mistaken preconceptions. So, make no mistake, taken together, these challenges for this disconnect are significant, they are widespread, and they are persistent. But the good news, there is a path forward, and there are reproducible and workable models that can be adopted by ordinary congregations of every stripe. Now, I want to show you something. Based on years of conversations with congregational leaders, the following matrix is my own personal estimation of how ordinary congregations, at least that I've encountered, divide out when it comes to their willingness and their ability to engage in reentry ministry. Take a look. So you can see on this across the top, you've got congregations who either feel unable to engage in this kind of ministry or they feel able. And then down the left-hand side, are they willing to do it or are they unwilling to do it? So as we kind of move around those four squares, you can see upper left-hand corner, 50% I estimate are willing but feel unable. They're open to change, but they're modestly resourced and they're feeling stuck. If we stay with you've got the 5% that are willing and able. They're both motivated and they're well-resourced. And many of those are actually already involved at some level in doing reentry ministry. As you move down, lower left, you can see estimate 35% are unable and willing because they're struggling to survive and also focused on other things. And lower right-hand corner, maybe 10% who are able but unwilling. They're well-resourced, but they're focused on other things. Now, we're convinced that the greatest opportunity seems to lie with that 50% of congregations who are motivated to do something, but they aren't sure how to make that happen. So let's talk about how to make that happen. The path forward for congregations that are willing but feeling unable will probably require both laying a solid biblical foundation, perhaps for the first time in a congregation, a solid biblical foundation for reentry, and then framing a new paradigm, a new framework for thinking about and discussing, planning for, carrying out effective reentry ministry. It's more than just technical things that we need to do. It goes to mindset. So let's start with a little thought experiment. Imagine you woke up this morning in the middle of a minefield. You look around and it's smoky and it's foggy and you can't see 10 feet in front of you. And you can't stay for long where you are because there's danger and there's destruction on every side. There are landmines. And you hear voices yelling, do this or don't do that. What do you do? What do you do? The answer is follow the footsteps of the guy who got out successfully. Now, I first heard this word picture from a conference speaker in Atlanta in early 2022, and he used this image to describe what it's like when men and women are leaving incarceration. He was describing people who are trying to make their way through the smoke and the fog of reentry, through the landmines of isolation, alienation, stigma, chaos, shame, lack of confidence, addiction, trauma, poverty. You know, the list goes on and on with hundreds of barriers and restrictions. There are landmines everywhere. But the speaker was saying about following the footsteps was that when it comes to the minefield of a criminal lifestyle, the wise approach is to study the behavior and the personal stories of those who've actually made it out and managed to build new, healthy, thriving lives. And this research into how people find their way out and how they thrive after prison is called desistance theory, as in cease and desist, as in stop and stay stopped. Desistance theory looks at the process of how men and women wind down and then stop their criminal careers and stay stopped. And with remarkable consistency, the thousands and thousands of stories that desistance theories have researched point to 5 key elements of the pathway out of the minefield. Those 5 elements are these. First, an openness to change. Often there's some sort of breakdown that opens the way to a breakthrough, a coming to yourself moment, a kind of surrender, sometimes an external legal conviction that leads to an inner conviction, that openness to change. Second, finding what they call good hooks or turning points. Because we all know that it isn't enough simply to be open to change. That open door of motivation can slam shut again if there's nowhere to go next. There need to be some tangible people and places and things to hook into and to explore, something bigger than ourselves. And some common good hooks or turning points are a healthy marriage or healthy relationship, right? Meaningful work. It can be the military, it can be the church. Third key element, seeing a positive future new self. Now, desistance researchers call this identity work, and there's a lot of scholarly literature on the centrality of this process. And that literature talks about things like redemption scripts or rituals of acceptance or making good, overcoming shame, right? Forging a new self. And when you listen to that, the parallels to the church's work on discipleship, they're obvious, aren't they? They are literally speaking our language. Fourth key element of desistance, seeing the old self and putting it away. Again, this kind of language is second nature to our Christian understanding of identity and our new identity in Christ. That is, to be able to look at our past self and say, well, that wasn't the true me. That wasn't the real me. That was the old me, the false me, the me that's being overcome by my new self that God is creating in me. This is also not a one and done deal, but it is a process, an unfolding process. And fifth and finally, the broader community's willingness to welcome someone home. Now, desistance isn't only a matter of what's happening internally to the one that's heading home. It's also deeply affected by the way society and communities, right, apply negative or positive labels to somebody, how they restrict or maybe restore their options, whether they continue or they cease punitive practices to make real reconciliation possible. Now, with these 5 elements, think about some of those things. Hold on to these thoughts about going through the minefield of desistance. I just want you for a minute to think about Jesus' parable about the father and his 2 sons, the prodigal son story. This is recorded in Luke 15. And if you look at that, the parallels are remarkable. There's the prodigal's openness to change that happens, right? That turning point when he gets up and heads home, his identity work on the way home, and the father's willingness and the older brother's unwillingness. You see the friction there to welcome him home, to think about these connections. Now, I want you to stop and think a little bit. We're going to shift gears. I want you to pick up from there and let's go back and now re-examine some of our working assumptions about what is justice, who are returning citizens, what are they like, and then how should we respond to engage with them. And we're going to look at some elements of this mindset that we hold, or that dominant paradigm, mental framework that we often find ourselves just unconsciously working from. I'm going to work through 5 just elements of them just to help us think this through. I think most of us a lot of times think along these lines. We think about justice and we think about just desserts. We think of justice as being fundamentally about crime and punishment, right? About determining guilt and then meting out those just desserts, what people deserve. Or we think about justice and we think about some kind of payback, or we think of karmic payback. That's a topic that's kind of in the culture and in the church, some of this kind of thinking, right? That through the process of retribution and punishment, that the scales of justice will, at least symbolically, be righted again. There's a kind of karma involved that says that good actions are going to get rewarded and evil ones get punished, right? Measure for measure until the scales of justice are kind of brought back into balance. Another aspect is thinking about returning citizens, and when we do, we think about need and risk. Again, picture 10 returning citizens showing up at the front door of your church this coming Sunday. Think about feelings and thoughts that pop up for you. It's probably conjuring up an image of a huge basket of physical, social, mental, emotional needs, but neediness is only the half of it, because the thought is also triggered that these people aren't just kind of different, they're potentially dangerously different. We think these people bring risk. They've done something so bad, so wrong, that they had to be removed from society. Not only that, who knows what damage prison has done to them to make them even more risky to be around, right? You're thinking they may be manipulative and predatory and either unwilling or unable to change. And that leads to what kind of response should we have, right? The response, and we think professional intervention. Here's where our minds instinctively go next then. We think since justice saw fit to remove them from society, since they're deeply needy and perhaps dangerously broken and risky, interacting with them now will require both fulfilling all their acute needs and fixing their underlying brokenness, all while minimizing risk. And our mental model shapes us to think that where returning citizens probably deserve to be and belong is with a holistic, professional, monitored social service organization, say a halfway house. And finally, when we think about how we respond, we tend to fall into this all or nothing. When it comes to returning citizens, it can just feel so overwhelming to even think about. We feel reluctant and embarrassed to look around our ordinary congregation like with what do we have to offer, like we're offering a bandage to somebody in need of major surgery. And so we fall for this all or nothing fallacy. We think we're ordinary, we're unprofessional, and we clearly can't do it all, so it's better to do nothing and leave it to others. We don't feel comfortable with that. Because to be clear, most churches do see mercy and a fresh start are central to the Christian faith. The problem is we don't know how to integrate those core faith convictions with this dominant paradigm about how justice functions and what returning citizens are like and how to respond to them. And so we get stuck in our mental models. Now, we may feel stuck. We probably are stuck, but we don't need to stay there. I want to go back and revisit each of these little attitudes that we've talked about, these working assumptions. We're going to look at through the lenses of both the kind of broader biblical witness and recent criminological research on desistance from crime. We're going to use the acronym GRAND, G-R-A-N-D, GRAND, to describe this new paradigm, which we see as more biblical, more faithful, more hopeful, more balanced, and more effective than what we've been working with. So here in a nutshell are the 5 building blocks of this grand new paradigm. They are G, grace motivated, R, restoration framed, A, asset based, N, network implemented, and D, desistance informed. So let's walk through these real quickly. First is grace motivated. At the heart of the Christian message, the Christian experience, and Christian identity stands Jesus Christ. At the heart of Jesus Christ stands the victory of God's grace. Jesus not only demonstrates grace in everything he said and did, he commands it of us. He's leading his followers into a way of life that's grace motivated and grace suffused. That's where we start in our putting together a new mindset for this. Second is restoration framed. If the idea of just desserts and karma is justice based on deserved payback, grace is God's love that restores, right? Restoration is what happens when we shift how we conceive and how we do justice by changing a single word. God's grace calls for us to stop focusing on what the guilty deserve and instead start focusing on what everybody needs, shifting from deserve to needs to be whole again and to be put right. Think about it. What do alienated and shame-bound people really need? Well, they need exactly what the prodigal son needed, right? They need a restoration of their relational identity. They need our acceptance. They need to be welcomed home. They need to be celebrated, not for the wrong they've done in the past, but because they were lost and dead, but now they are found and alive, and they are our brothers and sisters. A, asset-based. Whatever particular or profound needs we may have at any one time, each of us is also made in God's image and likeness, and that means we're endowed by God with gifts and strengths. Instead of always assuming and probing for deficiencies and dysfunctions in people, we need to shift our attention to somebody's skills and gifts and strength and knowledge. Key point here we want to make and really underline is that returning citizens not only have these assets, but they will be an asset to your local congregation. Fourth, network implemented. We all know we get busy. It's so easy to fall into a ministry silo. But reentry is a massive social problem that not only encourages, but it actually demands a collaborative network response. There are many other organizations. They're already in the reentry game, some secular, some faith-based, but they need our help. Those organizations are waiting for the church, for the local church, to take its unique place at the table, not to dominate the process, not to be an afterthought, but to do our part and offer the treasure that we bear in earthen vessels. Just relax. You don't have to be the whole chain. Just be the strongest link you can be with what God's given your congregation. And then finally, desistance informed. Now, if we look again at the following takeaways from desistance theory, it's not hard to see how the church can play an important part. So again, people are in fact making it out of the criminal minefield, often without professional intervention. Second, this is an intensely personal process. And in this intensely personal process, people are constructing new selves with new hope. People need practical how-to hooks or turning points. People need to have a sense of personal agency and choice, and people need acceptance and encouragement from others. When you think about those things, can you see how an ordinary congregation is, in fact, uniquely positioned to help the returning citizen who wants to desist from criminal activity, and how it can be the supportive community where that change can happen? That means whatever your church's size or giftedness, you can provide deep purpose, real belonging, and a new identity. So bottom line, it is time to start thinking differently about the church and reentry. Think grace instead of karma. Think restoration instead of retribution. Think what people actually need instead of what you think they deserve. Think assets and strengths instead of risks and needs. Think of what returning citizens can bring to the table instead of what they might take from it. Think networking. Think of being a strong link in a chain instead of doing all or nothing. Think desistance. Think of the transformative power of acceptance and belonging and new identity in Christ instead of abdicating to professional interventions. So how can we come alongside returning citizens in an effective and helpful way? Well, having a strong biblical foundation and a new paradigm for entry, it's crucial and it's a great start, and that's why we started with that. But most congregations also need a range of possible practical pathways to consider. So we're going to look at 8 distinct but overlapping ministry models that you can explore to see how well they might fit your congregation strengths and your neighborhood context. Now, these 8 are intended to be suggestive. They're not exhaustive. There could be other pathways as well. They're also intended to be complementary, not mutually exclusive. They can be blended in some ways. Bottom line, bundle these possibilities in whatever way seems to fit the strengths of your congregation and the resources you have available, and just contextualize. So here are the 8 models in brief, and we're gonna dig into each one of them in turn afterwards. So here they are. First is the service station model. It says, you've been through a lot. We know that you have a lot of needs right now. Come and get some of what you need. Second, the recovery fellowship model says, we're on a journey from addiction to freedom. Come and work your sobriety with us. The third model is the coach, mentor, connection model, which says, reentry is tough to figure out on your own. Come and get connected to somebody who can help you find your way and take your next steps. Fourth is the peer-led ministry model, which says, we get you because we've been there and we're just like you. Come for church on the inside, the outside version. Fifth is the jail to congregation pipeline, which says, we're already connected on the inside. Now come and join us on the outside. Sixth is the life-changing small group model, which says, God's already been at work in your life. Come and keep growing spiritually and as a leader in a welcoming and supportive group setting. Seventh is the whole family support model. It says, come with your family. We're here for all of you. And finally, eighth is the mission station model, which says, you have a lot to offer. Come with your passion, your gifts, and your skills, and let's make a difference together. So let's unpack each of these models. The first is the service station model, which says to returning citizens, you've been through a lot. We know you have a lot of needs right now. Come and get some of what you need. Now, if you're a fairly typical congregation with limited resources and you want to get started in reentry, this is probably the first place to start. That's because as a group, returning citizens tend to have a lot of tangible physical needs. They're scrambling to make ends meet. They're looking for welcoming people and accessible places where they can find the services they need and kind of, grab and go. The top 4 common needs met by the service station model are food, clothing, hygiene kits, and transportation assistance. That's what we found from our survey. Now, the service station model is a great fit. There are more needs being met than those, but those tended to rise to the top. Now, the service station model is a great fit for a congregation that is already actively engaged in a similar ministry. Now, often this just means applying what you already know and what you already do to a slightly different group of people, or sometimes to the same people you're already serving. They may already be those folks that you're meeting and engaging with. Or for a congregation that's accessible to people in need. Now, because transportation is such a problem for so many returning citizens when they first get out, right? Proximity matters. So being near a bus line or something is really helpful. But remember this, there are also options where you can take your services to them where they congregate instead of making them come to you. This is actually, a great fit for a congregation that just wants to dip a toe in the reentry waters. Now, this approach doesn't require much to get going. It doesn't need to interfere with your Sunday schedule, and it can provide an opportunity for your folks to serve from Monday to Saturday. One of the questions that come up very easily, very quickly when you start thinking about these practical pathways is, well, how do you connect with returning citizens in the first place? So let's just go ahead and address a little bit of that right here. Well, one of the ways is just start by reaching out to your local parole and probation offices or with the community affairs officer at your local jail and checking in with other service providers in your area. And like most people are uncertain how to do that, let me just tell you, you can simply go online, go to your web browser and type in, how do I connect with my local parole or probation office as a community partner? And then watch generative AI come up with a list of phone numbers and suggestions. Actually, suggestions for what to say and how to get it started. It literally can be that easy. In any case, ask a lot of questions. Find out what's already happening so you're not reinventing the wheel. Where possible, try to fill the gaps. Now, on occasion, you may find other providers acting territorial or being competitive. That's unfortunate, but it's something you may just have to put up with. It's more likely, though, that you'll soon be well received and find out how you can fit in. So what are the advantages and what are the challenges to the service station model? First of all, the advantages. It's modular, meaning pick the practical service area or areas where you already have strengths and capacities. You don't have to begin by trying things you've never done with people you've never met, right? It's scalable. Pick a rhythm that works for you and that you'll be able to do fairly consistently. You can always scale up or scale down depending on demand and your capacity to do it. Third advantage is it's visible. This model gives your congregation members a visible place to make the world of reentry real for them personally. Right? Your folks will start to get it. They can jump in and serve in a practical way. And it's a visible sign to the community at large that your church cares for those leaving incarceration. Those are the advantages. The challenges of this service station model is it can be impersonal. We talked about this before. The interactions in this model tend to be experienced as like provider to client. Now, returning citizens may think that you're good and kind people, but they may instinctively feel as if they're your project or they're just a number. It can be impersonal. The other challenge is that it's ongoing. Everybody knows how hard it is to get people to commit over the long haul. And this is challenging in this context because the service station model thrives when it can be consistent and long-standing and people get to know about who you are and what you do. That's the first model. The next model is the recovery fellowship model, which says we're on a journey from addiction to real freedom. Come and work your sobriety with us. Now, because it aligns strongly with many aspects of the grand paradigm, right, we talked about earlier, this model is probably deserving of your full attention. Unlike the service station model, which is built on an assumption that returning citizens are actually different from and certainly needier than most people in your congregation, the recovery fellowship model is built on the conviction that there is a lot of overlap between people who are struggling with the same demons and are on the same path to transformation and freedom. Right? And research, by the way, shows a significant correlation between substance abuse disorder and involvement in the criminal justice system. Now, recovery fellowship that model is a great fit for a congregation that maybe has the following. One, has leaders who are in recovery themselves. This helps personally bind the concerns and the loyalty of the recovery group to the congregation at large. It's a great fit for a congregation that already appreciates the significance and connection between addiction, recovery, transformation, and the Christian faith. Now, if this topic of recovery and addiction never comes up in your congregational life, you're going to obviously need to do more prep work before you can get engaged in with this. And finally, it's a great fit for a congregation that's comfortable enough with the language and theological perspective that's embedded in existing branded recovery materials. The alternative is you could create your own in-house materials, but not only is that time consuming, but that kind of forfeits the pipeline effect for people leaving incarceration. People many times are involved in programs while they're still incarcerated. When they get out, they already know certain programs, and you could benefit from that pipeline. Now, the advantages. What are the advantages and what are the challenges of the recovery fellowship model? Advantages. Number one, it is strongly desistance informed. Now, the elements that make a recovery fellowship personally transformative, like belonging, acceptance, identity work, overcoming shame, the new self, these are the key elements in the process of desistance from crime. Same thing. Another advantage is it's understood, right? Because of the influence of AA and NA and Celebrate Recovery and other recovery programs, both the people in your congregation and people in incarceration have a good idea of what to expect and what's involved. Third advantage is it's pretty location neutral because addiction is pervasive. There is a critical mass of people in urban, suburban, and rural areas who can benefit from a well-run recovery fellowship. Now, the challenges to this recovery fellowship model are sometimes, especially if it gets very successful, is that it can be myopic. Passionate people in recovery can tend to see everything, including criminal behavior, through the recovery or healing lens. Now, a recovery fellowship may be one potential landing pad for people leaving incarceration, but it's probably not the only one. Second challenge is it requires a medium-sized investment to launch. You're going to need a cohort of committed leaders who are ready to do some significant prep work to get this up and running. The next model is the coach-mentor connection model. And it says, reentry is tough to figure out on your own. Come and get connected with someone who can help you find your way and take your next steps. Now, as the name suggests, the coach-mentor model is really two distinct methods, but there's enough family resemblance between them for us to think about them together. Now, though there's a host of competing definitions for what constitutes real coaching, for our purposes, let's just consider coaching to be a relationship between a coach and what they call a coachee, a coach and a coachee, where the coach comes alongside, not above the coachee, right, to help the coachee develop or clarify his or her own goals and objectives. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do, right? The coachee sets the agenda. The coach can help with a reality check. Where are you now? The coach is there to identify roadblocks and resources. What needs to change? Coach is there to be future and action oriented. What next? What practical steps could you try? The coach is there, comes alongside to be accountable, to do the follow-up. How did it go? What are you going to do now? Now, coaching, it's distinct from either counseling or consulting. A coach will ask powerful questions. The consultant is the one who's there to give the expert answers. Think of coaching as a future-oriented, goal-oriented, action-based process. The heart of coaching is asking helpful and powerful questions to surface somebody's awareness, to surface their motivation, and to surface their confidence. That's coaching. Mentoring is different. Mentors draw upon their own personal experience and their knowledge to give guidance and advice to their mentees, right? Mentors can help returning citizens kind of restore and rebuild what's called social capital, connections with other people that can get, and often is just depleted during incarceration. Mentors can open doors, they can broker introductions, they can provide references, they can give encouragement. When the fit is right, mentors can be effective and inspiring role models, especially if the mentor is a returning citizen himself or herself. In that case, the person can take encouragement and say, well, if he did it, maybe I can too. And coaching is perfect for people who know they need help but don't want to be told what to do. Think about that. Mentoring is perfect for people who are looking for a longer-term relationship with a more experienced role model. Both of them can be used in group settings, but are more frequently done one-on-one. Now, a coach approach or mentoring program to minister to returning citizens, it might be a good fit for your congregation if you have leaders who possess kind of key traits like emotional self-awareness, empathy, personal humility, determination, good listening skills, and patience. And for a congregation that can develop a connection to other reentry providers or parole officers who can make referrals. Now, thing is, you can be a great coach or mentor, but without relevant connections, you're not going to be able to use your gifts because you're just not going to be able to be seen by enough people. How do you get started? How would you get started in this kind of coaching approach or mentoring approach? Well, for coaching is something you can learn to do. You can do some self-study with written resources. There's all kinds of books out there. But then online or in-person training will really help you develop your coaching skills. It's possible to get the basics down for under $500. And once you've gone through a coaching 101 program, it's important to practice skill development to learn the art. And it is an art, and you can learn to do it. Now, let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of this model. Advantages are it is extremely flexible. A 30 to 60 minute coaching session can be held bi-weekly or monthly. It's doable for a lot of people. It is extremely accessible. Coaching can effectively be done by phone or Zoom. It is extremely cost effective. There is virtually no ongoing cost or operational challenges or space requirements or budgetary impact. And it is extremely teachable. Coaching, again, as I said, it is a learned skill. To expand your coaching footprint, your ministers can learn how to coach in a group setting. Now, there are all those advantages. There are some challenges. One of those is it can be hard to overcome some stereotypes, right? When people say coaching or mentoring, it can evoke different things. Coaching can evoke images of a sports coach barking out orders or bossing people around. And mentoring sometimes, for some people, it can conjure up something geared more towards children and teens. And the other challenge is it can be hard to get the chemistry right. Since this is often one-on-one, the interpersonal dimension is crucial. Personality, age, style, gender, culture, racial aspects, it can all make this personal fit kind of a challenging thing to do. And we've talked to plenty of people. Gender appropriate matching can be a prudent best practice and can help avoid the appearance or the reality of inappropriate or unsafe relationships. And finally, it can be hard to make enough connections because of the reasons we just stated. There's not likely to be a long line of returning citizens waiting to be coached or mentored because sometimes they just got the wrong idea about it. Let's move on to the next model, the peer-led ministry model. This one says to returning citizens, we get you because we've been there. We're just like you. Comfort, church on the inside, the outside version. Now in this model, it's important from the get-go to kind of clarify the goal and the vision. Is the goal, for example, to have a peer-led minister who can tell returning citizens, hey, there's a special place for us in this congregation? Or is the goal and the vision get to the point where that leader can say, this whole congregation is by and for returning citizens? Or is it something in between? What is the scope and the scale of that, being a peer-led ministry? Now, whatever the form it takes, a common feature of this model can be an individual peer leader. We see this a lot. As in many other situations, people follow other people. So effective peer reentry leaders tend to be winsome, attractive people, credible, reliable men and women who have A, lived experience, B, can demonstrate positive change in their own lives, and C, can function well as the face and the voice of the ministry. And this kind of model can be a good fit for a congregation that has already bought into reentry ministry, that has a credible, faithful, reliable, winsome leader with lived experience of incarceration and successful reentry, and also has a congregation that has capacity for another parallel ministry for this new reentry ministry to take off like this. The advantage of this, they're huge, right? First of all, relevance and credibility. Peer-led ministries, you don't have to try to achieve authenticity with returning citizens. They already have it, right? It's there from the get-go. Reputation. If this is done well, your ministry can be your community's go-to place for all things reentry, and that can create a self-reinforcing upward spiral, this reputational gain that you get. But that comes with some challenges too. And that there's a reputational challenge. There's a potential downside of being known as the reentry church. The community might stereotype you and reduce your congregational reputation to a kind of a niche, one-note specialty ministry. Another challenge is churn. Returning citizens come and go and come and go. Even if they love what's happening in your ministry, circumstances might make it impractical for them to remain. And then what happens if or when your peer ministry leader leaves your congregation? So ongoing leadership development is essential for that to be happening. And finally, just the aspect of financial sustainability. Most returning citizens are financially insecure and are that way for quite a while. That means the larger the footprint of the reentry ministry relative to the overall size of the congregation, the greater the financial challenge to sustainability. Let's shift to go to another model, the jail to congregation pipeline model. The jail to congregation pipeline model says we're already connected on the inside, right? Come and join us now on the outside. And this is a great fit for a congregation that has the capacity to be both missional and attractional. Not only will you want to do whatever reentry ministry that you're designed for, but you'll need to figure out how to get involved in jail ministry as well. So this is tough to do both things for an ordinary congregation, but it is not impossible for an ordinary congregation. It's a great fit for a congregation that has the bandwidth and the connections to have a consistent presence at a local facility. Inmates can be a skeptical bunch and are often wary of folks who are inconsistent. So some of the advantages to this, and there's some challenges on both sides, like every one of these models. One of the advantages is it's authentic. An invitation to connect with your congregation coming from somebody who's doing jail ministry and talking to people is more authentic, it is more meaningful, it is more effective if it's building on that personal relationship. The people you're inviting already feel comfortable with you. It's organic, right? Your congregation members are not only acting as ministers from the congregation, they're also acting as both the personal guides and the hosts back into the life of the congregation, connecting returning citizens to other congregation members. The discomfort and the fear of rejection felt by returning citizens when entering into a church community, man, that is just greatly eased when they're connecting with some community members they've already gotten to know and trust. And the challenges of this model is it's fragile. Partly because the model is predicated not only on the ability to maintain a steady flow of volunteers from your church who are going in to provide a sustained presence in jail, but also an ability to keep getting access to enter the facility. Those things don't always continue. Another challenge is it's regulated. It is essential to get a clear understanding of your local jail's firewall policies. Some facilities prohibit regular jail volunteers from working with returning citizens when they're released. And the third challenge, it's costly. For the ordinary congregation, you probably need to be kind of all in, not so much in terms of finances here necessarily, but in terms of time investment and in identifying and training and deploying volunteers and leaders in the jail and reentry ministries. Shift gears a little bit, and let's go to the life-changing small group model, which says God's already been at work in your life. Come and keep growing spiritually and as a leader in a welcoming and supportive group setting. Here's the thing. Your most powerful reentry ministry might be sitting in plain sight. Chances are there's already some kind of small group ministry happening in your congregation, whether it's a Bible study or a friendship group or a grief support group. There's a couple of reasons why small groups are a great option for connecting with returning citizens. First is you don't need to create the demand. Lots of returning citizens are already deeply into reading scripture and they want to keep growing when they're released. Second is small groups are a great crucible for identity transformation. Remember we talked about that identity work? We said research shows that identity transformation is at the very heart of desistance from crime. The topics covered in a robust life application small group study, they can constitute the curriculum for identity change. And third, small groups can provide a great place to belong. Unlike large group gatherings where people can get lost in the crowd, a small group provides a place where returning citizens can be met, welcomed, known, and appreciated on a personal level in order to directly counter the unhealthy shame that many of them carry. Now, considering this kind of small group ministry, you need to think about that both content excuse me, both content and format matter. Now, it's kind of essential that a format that allows each participant ample opportunity to reflect, to share, listen to others. This can be a profound new experience for returning citizens, and it promotes what? Equality, belonging, engagement. So the format matters. And then for the content, the topics like shame, broken relationships, grace and forgiveness, shattered dreams, meaning of work, temptation, discerning and following God's will, and so on, these can apply to anybody. Life-changing small group is model. This is a great fit for a congregation that already has small groups going. It's easier to tweak what you already know and you're good at than to try something new with people, again, you don't know. And it's a great fit for a congregation that can adapt life application Bible studies to account for returning citizens' life situations. The advantages to this model is it just builds on a core strength of many congregations. This isn't rocket science. It isn't expensive. Another advantage is it builds mutuality. Returning citizens are simply full participants in the group. They're not clients. They're not somebody's project. They just, right? And it builds understanding. With open conversations and personal life application, congregational members, they can actually integrate returning citizens' perspectives into their own perspective and vice versa. Mutual understanding. Challenges to this model is finding useful life application Bible study material that's returning citizen focus. It's harder than you might think. So you may need to do some of the work of adapting materials yourself as you proceed. We have some life application Bible studies focused for returning citizens, and we can share some of those in some of our materials. You can look that up on our website. Returning citizens' lives can often be chaotic, especially in the early post-release days. This affects their ability to come regularly, and it can present logistical challenges to your small group dynamics, but that happens with any participants, as we know. A couple more, let's go through those. The next model is what we're calling the whole family support model, which puts out the message, come with your family, we're here for all of you. Interestingly, this particular model shifts the frame of reference for reentry ministry. Right? Instead of the focus being solely on the individual who's being released for incarceration, this approach widens the lens out to focus on family members who have been affected in their own ways. These families are often struggling emotionally and financially and relationally and spiritually. And in many, if not most of these situations, the whole family suffers from shame. And that means a hallmark of the whole family support model is the consistently intentional public proclamation in word and deed of their acceptance into full participation in the community. Family members aren't parents who failed or kids who have a parent to hide. So this shame-busting message of acceptance can go out to your congregation now. In fact, there's probably a significant subset of your members with an immediate or extended family member who has been justice involved. So here are two turnkey programs worth considering. One you may know, one you may not. First option that may already be known to you is the Prison Fellowship Angel Tree program. Through this program, churches are mobilized to give children a gift, to give the gift of the gospel and personal message of love on behalf of the incarcerated parent. Prison Fellowship makes it easy for your congregation to start dipping your toe in the water, and your ministry can grow from there. You start connecting with the family of the incarcerated. Second option is really on the other end of the spectrum is one that you may not have heard of. It's called Healing Communities USA's, their Stations of Hope. Now, this was originally founded by the former Philadelphia Mayor Wilson Goode. This Healing Communities approach takes the approach of providing you and your congregation with a vision, a curriculum, a range of practical resources, and training process to help you reframe your congregational culture into, instead of a spiritual home, turn it into a station of hope or a healing community. Think of this as a literal training manual for reorienting the heart of your congregational culture around restorative justice and healing. The idea here is to take a deep dive into restructuring your congregation's culture. Now, with Angel Tree, the focus is on ministering to the family of the incarcerated. With Healing Communities, the focus is on transforming the congregation itself into an agent of reconciliation and healing. And in both, though, the returning citizen will join the family or join the congregation that's already engaged in overcoming stigma and healing wounded spirits. Now, this model is a great fit for a congregation that is serious about family ministry and demonstrates it. So you can send a signal to the returning citizen that this is a place that cares about my kids, or they can think this is a place that will help me be a better parent, or this is a place where I can work on restoring my broken relationships. The advantages of this whole family support model is it is available as a turnkey ministry. You don't have to do all the hard work of establishing relationships with prisons or developing a curriculum from scratch. These two that at least that I talked about are tested approaches you can implement out of the box. Second, this kind of approach can be what they call stickier because returning citizens can join in where the family is already accepted and engaged. That stigma is reduced and belonging is a lot easier. They're just joining their family. And this model can play to your existing strengths: children's ministry, youth ministry, Bible studies, marriage, parenting support, all those things. These can play to the strengths that you have and reach that family. The challenges can be, well, as follows. First, toe-dipping ministry can easily be static. Doing Angel Tree for a month a year can be a good place to start, but it's probably not intended to be your final destination as a robust reentry ministry. All-in transformation, as in the Healing Communities model, they can easily remain merely aspirational. This approach really demands a lot and may feel, impractical for many congregations. And then finally, it's just that, let's just say what it is. Many returning citizens don't have a family to consistently worship with. Sometimes, as with families where there's been a divorce, family members find themselves shuttling between different households and different congregations. So it can be challenging to establish continuity and maintain relationships. Though it has the potential to be sticky, family ministry can also be, and also often is, messy. 7 down, 1 to go. Final model we want to share with you, the mission station model, which says, hey, you have a lot to offer. Come with your passion, your gifts, your skills, and let's make a difference together. It's like now for something completely different. This model turns the service station model on its head. Think about it. Instead of the instinctive focus on all the needs that most returning citizens have, the mission station model shines a light on their strengths, their gifts, their assets, and their inherent motivation to give back, their motivation to serve instead of being served. Now, I want you to remember that desistance research documents this need that people have to make good, to make amends as part of the process of living into their new identity. The need to serve others instead of self is often a God-given, long-nurtured dream born during incarceration. So, for example, many inmates talk about their eagerness upon their release to try to influence youth in their communities not to follow in their footsteps. So this mission station model is a great fit for a congregation that is missional, actively engaged in social service ministries, and has room for new people, for new participants. That has leaders who can help guide and apprentice returning citizens into new levels of ministry, and has a system of recognizing somebody's spiritual gifts and helping put those gifts to use. Some of the advantages here is that to this model is that it drives the process of desistance from crime by helping people make good and make amends. Another advantage is that it fosters collaboration. Your members and returning citizens, they're on opposite ends of serving. I'm serving, you're being served. They're actually working alongside each other, and that changes things. It demonstrates respect. You're signaling to returning citizens that you take them seriously. They know they're valued, they know they're needed, they know they're respected as people who are contributing something important. And this mission station model actually pairs well with every other model, especially the service station model, Think about it. By combining opportunities to receive and serve, you create a healthy take and give dynamic. In fact, whatever other models you feel drawn to, the service station model can be a helpful complement. There are, of course, challenges to this. It can be hard to find good matches. That can be with anybody, right? When it comes down to actual implementation, it can be frustratingly difficult to match specific ministry opportunities that are there with people's actual competencies and bandwidth and work schedules and personal preferences. And then finally this, not all service is created equal. Then we made an important distinction here. Service opportunities, when they're understood to be part of a self-generated process of a reworked identity, right, and spiritual growth, these can be healthy, these can be powerful. Community service, on the other hand, right, that can often mean something very different. It's often imposed as a part of a legal sanction, and it can be experienced as a form of punishment. So when you talk about this and think about it, you obviously want to avoid any impression that what you want from returning citizens is for them to come, whether as part of their punishment or not, to help you do the church work that your own members don't want to do. Wow, so I know I've just given you a lot to take in all in one go, and I hope you're able to come away with some helpful takeaways and an appreciation for desistance research and the key role that congregations can play. The story of the prodigal son as a strong biblical foundation for thinking about reentry ministry, a new grand paradigm for thinking about what justice is and how it functions, about what returning citizens are like and how to engage with them. And then finally, the wide range of those 8 possible models and pathways that might fit you and might fit your circumstances. I hope you're seeing some real potential for your congregation, if it's one of those ordinary congregations for most of us, for your congregation to get involved in reentry ministry in a more focused and intentional way, and in a way that fits who you are. And if so, I guess the question is, what are your next steps, right, to turn that potential into actual ministry? And if you already know what to do next, just congrats and just run with it. If, on the other hand, as a leader, you're not quite sure how to take the next step to get things moving, and you've still got a bunch of questions or something, we just encourage you to download our free ebook, Effective Reentry Ministry for Ordinary Congregations, a how-to guide. And you can, that's below. The link to get that is below. It has everything we talked about here, as well as all the survey results and insights from the 66 congregations that we surveyed and that participated. And there's a lot there. There's reentry wisdom from the front lines, all about their successes and their challenges and their dreams, the resources they found most helpful. The how-to guide also has some leaderships on getting started, what you do next, some guidelines you can use for thinking about and discussing policies you could use for sex offenders in the congregation, as well as a bunch of helpful links to studies and resources that we think are really good for you to be able to build on what we've been talking about. And if you're interested in any possible coaching help or consulting help from us, and we'd be open to that, and you can just reach me at the contact info below. But in any case, at the end of the day, it is our hope and our prayer that every ordinary congregation can recognize their significance, their potential, their ability, their responsibility, and embrace the gift and the joy it is of welcoming home fellow prodigals, the Father's beloved sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters. Be blessed and be bold.